Duskbloom paused, then let the question fall light and plain. Then why bring it up now, and with so much more honesty than before? Kaelan swirled his teacup, his tone a lazy drawl. Once the box is open, the mood's already wrecked. No point holding back. He took a sip, grimaced slightly, and set it down again with a soft clack. Next time you play that zither, I'd suggest you just act the mute. Any vermilion bird or white tiger who caught a glimpse of you would probably turn right around and walk away. Ah, but hold on, they are all from the forlorn lady. That little trick wouldn't fool them. They'd be more likely to rip that pretty face clean off your skull. The corner of his mouth twitched as he spoke. White tiger meant Xylia. If Xylia ever found out he'd met a woman this stunning in secret. Well, ripping someone apart would be the least of it, and the someone, probably him. No anger touched Duskbloom's eyes. Instead, a faint smile rippled through them. So young Master Zhao does hold a grudge, because of the wanted notice. Kaelan lifted his gaze, surprisingly direct. I killed a man right in front of the court's chief officer. It'd take a ghost's luck not to get a bounty slapped on my head. That was my choice. Blaming you for it would be pointless. If anything, I should thank you for lifting the order. And by the way, the portrait was well drawn. The smile in her eyes deepened. Kaelan gulped his tea, winced at the scald, and clicked his tongue. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped low. I just don't want to be some piece on a board watched from above by those in the heavens as they drop in new pieces every so often, observing the shifting game like it's a monkey show. You're the same, and so is one other person. Honestly, she's far worse than you. Most of my resentment is piled on her. I might have some anger toward you, and I've been rude, but I really can't say I dislike you. Duskbloom did not ask who the other person was, nor did she defend her own surveillance of Kaelan. She simply raised her cup with a grace so light it seemed she feared disturbing the breeze within the bamboo lodge. If that's the case, then Wenzhuang offers young Master Zhao an apology. A nameless anger clogged Kaelan's chest, unable to vent. Grouchily, he lifted his own cup, its coarse clay rim bumping against that white, jade mouth. The impact rang out not as the dull thud of ordinary teacups, but a crisp, piercing note, like thin ice fracturing, shards of jade shattering together, pure and cold and stabbing right into the eardrums. A sudden hush fell over the bamboo lodge. It was as if something intangible had shattered right along with that sound. The grievances between them sealed over, buried, and from this moment on, they could speak of what came next. Duskbloom tilted her head back, drained her cup, and set it down. The instant the base touched the table, she doubled over abruptly, pressing a sleeve to her mouth as a violent fit of coughing seized her. The coughs came sharp and rapid, as though an invisible hand had clamped down on her lungs and wrenched. All at once, that composed, tranquil elegance crumbled. Loose hair spilled over her shoulders, her frail frame heaved with each spasm, every breath trembling her chest. A sickly pallor diffused through the air, threatening to scatter her like blown dust. Kaelan froze, cup in hand, rooted to the spot. He'd never witnessed something like this. This was internal injury, not choking on water. What now? Pat her on the back. Inappropriate, stand by and watch, even worse. His mind churned, and only after a long moment did it strike him. The internal injury medicine he'd brought from the Kiwi family was still on him. Not caring whether it matched the affliction, he hastily fumbled out a pill, the coolness on his palm making his fingertips tremble. Works quite well for calming internal wounds. I took a kick to the Danshan once, and one pill set me right. Duskbloom, still racked by coughs, managed a few weak, panting breaths and shook her head feebly. Strands of hair clung to the damp skin of her neck, and her voice came low and hoarse. It's no use. This comes from forcing a break through too urgently, long ago. The lung meridian was damaged. Even His Majesty could do nothing. Shit, and that's the top of the heavenly chart. Kaelan cursed before he could stop himself. How come sometimes he seems so damn impressive, and other times like a complete idiot? And you, a proper high-born lady, all clouds and placid breezes on the surface. What urgent need was there to force a breakthrough? Would Great Xia drop dead if you delayed one more level? Duskbloom gave him an odd look, watching him rage, and said softly, You must not disrespect His Majesty. I'm just a mountain bandit. It's him I'm disrespecting, going to bite me. Kaelan stuck out his neck defiantly. Especially you. Kaelan choked, then sullenly retorted, I'm no such thing. Is that so? Duskbloom's gaze drifted to his back. Dragonsparrow seemed to sense it. The long, silent black blade suddenly let out a low, resonant thrum, its vibration trembling the air. It was as if an ancient, savage beast had stirred from slumber, answering Duskbloom's gaze. The blade's hum was deep but not fierce. Instead, it carried a note of joy and resonance, rippling outward in waves that filled the bamboo lodge, struck the walls, and surged back again. From within that reverberation, Duskbloom's voice came, so very soft, yet unwavering. Then why is Dragonsparrow rejoicing because of you? Kaelan stood dumbfounded. He knew full well that people like Duskbloom had firmly locked the suspicion of the missing prince onto him. Two survived Luo Manor. Zelia had been a suspect, but as a forlorn lady, she'd been temporarily set aside, turning every eye toward himself. They'd checked the age discrepancy, the martial training timeline, then moved on to cultural foundations and technique compatibility. The more they looked, the more the pieces fit. Even the hard contradiction of his age had been smoothed over by people's own convenient fabrications falsely reporting his age, a plan to live as an ordinary mortal, and so on. Ironic, all of it. Yet he could not simply deny it. He coveted the inner art of Zyrax. Even if his natural constitution limited him from making it his primary path, it underpinned everything, boosting external techniques, converting Kai and blood, suppressing the roots of his illness, accelerating recovery. That art was nearly the foundation of his survival. He depended on it every day. In battles beyond his tier, it looked like the bloodshed art unleashing its might. But what truly kept him from collapsing after a single strike was this inner art. He also coveted Great Xia Dragon-Sparrow. After cleaving with it so many times, it was hard to sever the feeling of blood-bonded connection in his hand. He knew full well that keeping it by his side invited disaster, yet he could not bring himself to let it go. Since he'd taken from Zyrax's legacy, he must bear its karmic burden. How could he now righteously wash his hands clean, nor could he sell out Zelia? She genuinely hated Zyrax and wanted absolutely nothing to do with the title of princess. In the bamboo lodge, a pin drop could have been heard. Duskbloom watched his long silence and quietly sighed. All these years, have you been hating his majesty? Kaelan's mouth twisted. You've guessed right, lady, but the one who hates him is Zelia, not me. On his back, Dragonsparrow hummed faintly, a soundless answer, its vibration pulsing in the stillness. Duskbloom was silent for a long while. Tendrils of tea smoke wreathed her brow. She seemed to waver, and after a long pause, finally murmured, though it doesn't show on the surface, His Majesty's own cultivation must have gone astray. Many have guessed as much. That's why there's such undercurrent of turmoil now. It's not that he refuses to act on some things. He likely lacks the strength to act. As she spoke, her own words sounded feeble even to her, and she lowered her head, quietly pouring fresh tea. Kaelan bluntly said, in any case, I'm not him. Telling me this is pointless. To Duskbloom's ears, his words sounded like nothing so much as sullen defiance. She dispensed with exposing him further, and said directly, if your highness refuses to acknowledge it, will you sit and watch Great Xia fall without an heir, its rivers and mountains overturned? Kaelan replied, what's that to me? Duskbloom released a soft sigh. Even if you are not, since you have inherited the Celestial Hexa-Harmony Art and received the Great Xia Dragon-Sparrow, should you not do something in return? Kaelan lowered his gaze to the tea in his cup. Celestial Hexa-Harmony Art, so that was the grand title behind Xia's chaotic forging. He tugged at the corner of his mouth. True, taking his things comes with a debt. As long as no one tries to drag me into becoming a prince, I'm willing to do something for him as an exchange. Duskbloom fell silent once more. Not become a prince, rely on a lone wanderer of the martial world, merely at the fourth gate of the profound pass, to go out and fight. Then Kaelan's voice cut in abruptly. Hey, me not becoming a prince is also better for you, isn't it? If I did, wouldn't it be awkward? We just apologize to each other what's next, discussing a marriage alliance. I haven't even brushed my teeth yet. Duskbloom froze for an instant. Across that always composed and classically elegant pale face, a faint flush rose, visible to the naked eye. Earlier, being likened to the courtesan, forlorn lady, had not angered her. Being told to wash up clean and wait for him had not angered her either. She had even tossed it back as a jest. But at this moment, hearing the words marriage alliance, a clear flash of shy fury stirred in those eyes, deep as still pools. Even if you were a prince, what's that to me? Why the hell does there have to be a marriage alliance? Her voice pitched higher, her fingertips digging into her sleeve hard enough to crease the cloud, brocade silk. And don't feed me that gossip, Monger Drivel, who told you marriage alliances come with a swap option. Kaelan dipped his head and took a sip of tea. Through the curling steam, the corner of his mouth hooked upward, slow, taunting, perfectly at ease. I know you're in a rush, no need to combust. That delivery was a masterpiece. Even if she hadn't been rushed, it was enough to set a saint on fire. Duskbloom's chest heaved. She looked ready to cough her lungs out. Light, hitched breaths fought to steady her, and her knuckles against the sleeve went bloodless. Kaelan's tone stayed lazy. I flipped through someone's chronicle of chaos rankings. You're third on the earthly chart, right? Duskbloom caught her breath, her voice frayed at the edges, and if I am. They left out your age, but with your cultivation and that rank in the imperial court, you can't exactly be a spring chicken. Past 30. 28. Kaelan paused. Still young enough for the hidden dragon list before 25, and already on the mortal chart. In 2 years, she'd clawed from the bottom of the mortal chart to the top 3 of the earthly chart. A sickly strategist with that commanding, regal edge. She was terrifying. Respect flickered through his mind. What left his mouth was, so you're 28 and I'm 20. And if the rumors pegging the prince at 17 are true, that's damn near a generation. Don't go nibbling fresh grass now. Be good. Duskbloom's teeth ground together so hard they nearly cracked. What I am telling you is that I have zero need for a marriage alliance with you. Kaelan let out a quiet snort. You might think that, your family won't. Otherwise, why trick Yuan into heading for the Barrow Mountains? You seriously think I'm an idiot? Duskbloom's breathing went shallow. She said nothing. Which is exactly why Kaelan poured himself fresh tea with maddening calm. I don't want the prince's identity, and you don't want a prince pushing for a betrothal. That makes us natural allies, doesn't it? You help bury it, swear I'm not the prince, then hand me a few jobs to clear the debt for the Cultivation Art and the Dragonsparrow. Everyone walks away happy. Sound good. Duskbloom's face was a stone mask. If he claimed that birthright, he'd win an empire and a clear shot at her hand. Duskbloom didn't know how many people in the world could refuse bait like that, but the man in front of her just had. The thought drifted up, unbidden Kaelan's own words. The man Duskbloom will never obtain. He'd meant them. Her ambition was fixed on the realm. Marriage didn't factor. Staying unwed past her mid-20s was already a rarity in this world, and for someone from a great aristocratic family, it was scarcer than relics dug from myth. But the world rarely granted such choices. At 27 last year, she'd hit the final deadline. Soon she'd be truly unmarriageable. Right then the crown princess died of illness, and her family began angling for the spot. As cursed fate would have it, the crown prince died too. She rushed immediately to Luo Manor and hauled that suspected prince, Kaelan, into the capital. Then Kaelan also died right in front of her. She brought the body back for testing. The blood didn't mingle. Her eyes cut to the 2 survivors from Luo Manor. If the male was the true prince, had killing Kaelan been about stopping someone else from stealing his identity? She nudged the Kui family straight at that theory. From the look of things, Kuiana seemed to take a liking to him, but the Kui family shoved him out and even tossed a Dragonsparrow in her face, brandishing it. The choice sat in front of her again. Hesitant to her bones, Duskbloom sent a subordinate to invite Kaelan to talk. He postured, insisting she come herself. Fine, a personal visit it was. Nothing else mattered more. What Duskbloom chewed over hardest was if he truly claimed the prince's identity. What would her future even look like? Would she actually be forced to discuss a marriage alliance with him? And his reply boiled down to, "Don't bite fresh grass. I'm not interested in you." The same defiant stare as back then. The killer, Kaelan. A thought surfaced from nowhere. If Great Xia really had a crown prince like this, the empire would stand secure. For her personally, a man like that on the throne would spare her a world of trouble. Even if he was a counterfeit, right this moment Duskbloom was halfway ready to prop him up as the real thing. Her mood slowly leveled. That earlier frustration that nearly made her hack up a lung dissolved into something calm, almost liberated. How utterly ridiculous. He refused the throne, refused the marriage, and that was what finally let her breathe. Duskbloom let a faint smile slip, her eyes curving into crescent arcs, the earlier shame and fury scattered like dust on the wind. Her deep, quiet gaze rested on Kaelan, carrying a trace of meaning she couldn't quite name. Had I known earlier, her voice came soft. I, Wan Zhuang, should have come to meet the young master long ago. No matter now. Duskbloom lifted the pot again, boiling water threading like silk into the celadon cup. Steam climbed, blurring her expression into something detached and elegant. Since your highness remains so set against the identity, shall we find a middle path and settle on something everyone can live with? Kaelan let that your highness slide. He leaned back, his eyes fixed on her fingers as she poured. That was my reason for coming. What does the commander propose? With unhurried grace, Duskbloom slid a porcelain cup toward him. You won't acknowledge the status, but you're willing to take on certain tasks to clear the debt for the art and the Dragonsparrow. Correct. Yes. She turned her fingertip, and a jade token settled lightly onto the tea table. Warm white light rippled across its surface, the front carved with demon suppression, the back etched with the network patterns of a high-ranking covert operative. This is the Demon Suppression Agent's Jade Token. With it, you can draw on local demon suppression, bureau, resources, intelligence, manpower, whatever you need. Kaelan reached out and took it. The jade was cool against his palm. His grip steadied, but his knuckles blanched for a split instant. He lifted his head. Then, what do you need me to do? Trouble stirs across the realm, alien races burrow in shadow, and the demon sect spreads disaster. You drift through the martial world. You've dealt with the demon sect. Duskbloom paused, her cup halting at her lips. Through the thin veil of steam, her gaze skimmed his face. You've even dallied with the blood god cult yourself. What if I made you a hidden agent of the Demon Suppression Bureau, tasked specifically with countering the demon sect? By demon sect, do you mean the Four Symbols sect and the blood god cult? Kaelan's voice dropped low. To hurt Xalia, to love her and then destroy her. His throat clamped tight. Duskbloom shook her head. Not just them. There are factions like the Maitreya sect buried among remnants of ancient scripture. Your time in the martial world's been short. You'll run into them soon enough. Kaelan's lungs eased. Not just the Four Symbols sect, then. He gripped the jade token, his thumb skimming its edge. I can do this, but I want it clear who gives me orders with this token. I'm not letting anyone yank my leash. Duskbloom lifted a forefinger and tapped the very tip of her nose. Your direct superior is me, only me. Even I won't command you at will. I'll only consult. Her voice was cool, but a thread of something almost indulgent ran beneath it. Kaelan went quiet for a heartbeat, then tucked the token away. Fine, I'll take the job. In return, you won't use my identity to screw me over anymore. I can vouch for myself, not for the great clans. That's enough. Kaelan stood. I'm leaving. Wait, Duskbloom rose with fluid grace, the wide sleeve fluttering to block his exit. She didn't touch him, but the air firmed into a wall you couldn't see. Right now, the demon sect is in Sword Lake City. Her eyes stayed level on his. Sabotaging this operation is your first task. Kaelan said nothing and set the jade token back down. It struck the table with a flat, heavy sound. His fingers hadn't fully let go, and his knuckles blanched again under the pressure. I resign. Something sparked behind Duskbloom's gaze. Because you have history with Xalia, you've even shared a bed. Kaelan sucked air through his teeth like a man with a bad tooth. A shred of mercy, Aunt Duskbloom. Words like that shouldn't come out of you. Duskbloom's faint smile vanished, her face unreadable. Kaelan slumped back, pure rebellion in every line of him. Xalia and I knew each other when we were nobodies. We've staked our lives on each other. I can't scheme against her. I resign. And if sabotaging this operation is precisely what saves her life. Kaelan's whole frame locked, as though some invisible wire had been jerked tight. His shoulders seized, his spine snapped straight, and a fierce, burning urgency flared in his stare. Explain it, now. Duskbloom sat again, lifting her teacup with unhurried calm. The steam half hid the faint bow of her lips. You already resigned. Why should this seat tell you a thing? The air thickened to stone. Kaelan lunged for the jade token. His fingertips hit the back of Duskbloom's hand before she pulled away. Warm skin and rough calluses scraped against each other like a brand. His arm locked up. His fingers snapped the token back on reflex. His throat bobbed hard. A grin broke across his face, awkward and careful, the kind he never wore. Commander, I didn't resign. Not at all. Just joking. Duskbloom glanced down at the fading heat on the back of her hand, then set her teacup aside with slow, deliberate grace. This man had always been wild, unbending. When had he ever smiled like that? For Xalia. Her face stayed blank. She steered them back on track. The Four Symbols sect came for one thing, the sword in ancient Sword Lake. They've performed rituals here before. They might have actually found a way, maybe even learned the sword's habits. Kaelan refilled her tea. Fresh steam curled up, and then... She watched him through the mist, voice unhurried. The imperial court has its reasons for not taking that sword. When the last epoch crumbled, heaven and earth collapsed into chaos. That rupture spawned countless rifts. Some call them dimensional fragments. The depths of ancient Sword Lake lead into one of those spaces. That sword doesn't exist in this world. Kaelan paused, so that's why nobody's ever pulled it out. Yes, she nodded. If all under heaven belongs to the imperial domain, does that include an otherworldly space? His Majesty's will is clear. Don't force it. Leave it for those with destiny. Such places often hold ancient secrets. They're karmic windfalls. We must not sever anyone's path to strive against heaven. Kaelan stared. A sovereign with that much restraint. Duskbloom didn't take the bait. She shot him a look, then pressed on. In any case, this is His Majesty's grace toward his subjects. Ancient Sword Lake is one such place. A true divine sword is sealed inside it. Then, why not claim it, if the court knows the method? It belonged to a pair of lovers from ancient times. Before the epoch collapsed, the man betrayed her. The woman ended her life there in despair. As heaven and earth shattered, the sentient sword burned the last of its power to protect its master's body, carved out a separate dimension, and sank to the lake bottom. The summer solstice aligns with the man's cultivation path. If someone performs a spirit summoning ritual, the sword might answer. Kaelan's voice hardened. It answers, thinking that faithless bastard has come, not to welcome him to kill. Duskbloom nodded, soft and final. So it's fierce. It'll kill whoever it sees. Kaelan's knuckles went white around the jade token. The tea room dropped into silence. Only the gurgle of boiling water filled the space. He spoke low after a long breath. Understood. Keep going. Beyond the bamboo tower, the wind kicked up hard. Duskbloom set her teacup down. Porcelain hit the wooden tray with a sharp clink. The Four Symbols sect came for that sword. They know some secrets, but not the true depth of the sword spirit's hatred. Her voice stayed quiet, but it sliced through the wind, tearing through the forest. They'll either give up, or they'll find some righteous gentleman to pull the sword, then take it by force. Kaelan cut in fast. Yes, she nodded. The moment the sword acknowledges a master, you'll have less than half an hour before the murder and the looting start. How do you think a blade drowning in that much hatred would react? The Dragonsparrow blade lay silent across Kaelan's lap, its hilt cold against his palm. He didn't dare answer. He knew Dragonsparrow's temperament, all drama and prickly pride. If it could fly on its own, every person in the vicinity would lose their head. And the sword at the lake bottom, its hatred made Dragonsparrow look tame. 1,000 years of venomous rage fermenting in the dark. If it went berserk, decapitation wouldn't be enough to settle it. Duskbloom had clearly reached the same conclusion. She straightened, her sleeve brushing the tabletop, voice grave. We haven't confirmed how many experts the Four Symbols sect brought, but retrieving an ancient relic sword that doesn't fit their core doctrine is just treasure, hunting by the book. By their rules, they wouldn't send protectors above the mortal chart level. If the sword spirit truly goes mad and lashes out, her words landed like stones. A sword isn't a person. It feels no pain, no injury. Light and sharp, if it possesses even more spirit than Dragonsparrow and can fly to slaughter, those people will never suppress it. Kaelan's knuckles tightened. Duskbloom's gaze dropped to his taut hand. Her cadence stayed slow, but every word cut. Once it breaks free and escapes Sword Lake City gets ripped apart. Scattered into chaos, we stop this. That's the full scope of your mission. Outside the window, wind skimmed the lake surface, dragging a low moan behind it, like something buried deep beneath the water, shifting in its sleep. Kaelan stayed quiet for a beat, his voice scraped out rough. Where are the Four Symbols sect people now? Does the Demon Suppression Bureau have leads? I'll talk to Chich, directly. They're cautious. Duskbloom shook her head. After noticing the Demon Suppression Bureau moved personnel, they were located overnight. We lost them. Assigning this mission to you accounts for that. You might still reach Xylia, if you can persuade her to give up. Good. If she refuses, we absolutely cannot let the Four Symbols sect provoke the sword spirit with that ritual. Kaelan asked nothing more. A thought stabbed through his chest like cold steel. If Chich, I got tangled in this scheme, what would the Divine Sword's hatred do to someone like her? He shut the thought down hard. The quiet in the bamboo loft held for a breath, then shattered. Kaelan shoved to his feet. The bench legs screeched against the blue brick floor, short, sharp, a beast's snarl. His cloak whipped up with emotion, slapping a gust of wind across the table. His unfinished tea shuddered. Ripples crashed outward from the center, slamming the thin porcelain walls. He pressed a fist into his palm in salute. No more words. The firelight carved his silhouette against the wall, his shoulders set like iron. Duskbloom gave a calm nod. Kaelan turned and left. His footsteps hit the bamboo stairs, each one heavy, urgent, a war drum's deep beat. The loft shivered. The brass bell, hanging from the eaves, jangled and swayed, its notes scattering like shattered rain. Duskbloom rose slow and walked to the railing. Night wind cut through her thin robes. She coughed, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. She opened her palm. A speck of red gleamed under the moonlight. A handmaid slipped from the shadows and draped a robe over her shoulders, voice thick with worry. My lady, since you're here, why not crush the Four Symbols sect yourself? Why send young Master Zhao into danger? He's only at the 4th stage of the Profound Gate. Duskbloom leaned on the railing, watching the tall figure vanish into the night, her face unreadable. I'll guard him from the shadows, she said, light as air. This mission is just a pretext for him to integrate into the Demon Suppression Bureau. Otherwise, why would I settle for merely stopping the Four Symbols sect? The handmaid's confusion deepened, but he doesn't even want to be a prince. What good does integrating into the Demon Suppression Bureau do? Duskbloom pulled her cloak tighter at the collar, knuckles whitening. What he's integrating into is an official identity. Not the Bureau itself. Her voice frayed in the wind, but each word held weight, and it lets every onlooker see clearly. I, Duskbloom, have decreed he is the prince. She turned her hand over, gripping the railing, staring toward the distant speck. When everyone considers him the prince, his denial won't matter anymore. The handmaid froze. Her lips twitched before she murmured, My lady, aren't you digging a pit for him? You told me before you wouldn't meddle in his identity. If placing the throne in his hands is a pit, so be it. Duskbloom looked down at the bloodstain in her palm. Wind, flickered candlelight made the dark red gleam and dim. So be it. She closed her fingers, crushing that metallic sweetness into her fist, like gripping a stick of incense about to burn out. After all, my time is running short. Kaelan strode through the streets, his cloak yanked straight back by the wind. He had no clue where to find Xylia. Hell, he didn't even know where Frost was. The inn was his only option. He reached the entrance just as Frost walked up from outside. Kaelan's eyes dropped to the utterly mundane sword at Frost's waist. He smacked his own forehead. Back at the bamboo loft, he'd been so tangled up in thoughts of the sword spirit that he'd forgotten to get the kid a proper blade. He didn't explain, just asked, Brother Han, still haven't found a suitable sword. Not quite. Frost's steps didn't slow as he walked right through the inn's doorway beside him. Someone made an appointment to meet me at Ancient Sword Lake on the start of summer, wanted me to look at a sword. I figured there was no harm in seeing it, so I agreed. Kaelan's stride hitched. Loyal honorable, a man who keeps his word, why hadn't this clicked before? Frost was practically built to be that sword's next master. The Four Symbols sect had marked him from the start. Kaelan turned, eyes fixed hard on him. You ever had a lover? No. What about the one you bled for? That old friend of yours? That was a man. Frost's face stayed utterly still. What I shared with him was close to what I share with you. Started with crossed blades, grew into respect, then we were brothers. So that was the edge of solitude. A heart untouched by romance carried no stain of faithlessness. Stand firm on loyalty and honor, and the sword's judgment would see nothing but clean slate. Kaelan tilted his head, meeting Frost's gaze, still as a well that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. If I die someday, will you avenge me the same way? The answer came without a breath of pause, a blade slicing silk. I would. Kaelan broke into a grin. His hand came down on Frost's shoulder with a solid, meaty thwack. I think you could actually claim that sword. But a sharp blade is easy to come by. What lurks in men's hearts, that's the real trap. Whoever invited you isn't playing clean. Stay wary. If this turns into something real, I'm coming with you. What lurks in men's hearts? The words dragged across the deepest scar Frost carried, the one he never touched. A flicker of shadow passed through his eyes before sinking back into the dark. Fine. Kaelan didn't push further. He shoved through the tavern doors first, but his mind was already spinning fast and hot. The start of summer, the date was locked. Frost, the target was locked. All that remained was finding Xylia before that moment arrived. If he reached her, maybe he could talk her into pulling back. If he couldn't. Then on that day, he'd shadow Frost to the lakeshore, slip her a message in the chaos, a buried card played in the dark, a final thread to catch her if she fell. He pushed out a long, stale breath. His boots hit the worn tavern floorboards, each step landing thick and heavy. Far off, something like a voice rode the wind from Ancient Sword Lake. It threaded through the streets, slipped past the window lattices, a sound like weeping from a gutted age, like a woman's fixed, unblinking stare in the moment before death. Kael and Tor Sword, Lake City apart. Days bled together. He scoured the eastern district to the western edge, from the roaring markets down into the filthiest alleys. He flushed out more than a few stupid, desperate thieves who thought they could lift that battered blade from his hip. Kaelan broke their necks in 2-3 moves and dumped the bodies in the gutters, but not a trace of Xylia, not even the edge of her sleeve. The Four Symbols sect had buried itself too deep. Even Duskbloom's agents, casting their nets in silence, hadn't hauled them up. A lone drifter like him had even less chance. Xylia was sharp, too sharp. With the storm raging at full gale, she'd never risk slipping out to meet him in secret. More than once, Kaelan stood at the mouth of some dead end alley, fists clenched white, swallowing the fury back down his throat. But he knew the truth in his gut. This time, Xylia was outplayed. The chief of the Demon Suppression Bureau didn't need to comb the city. All he had to do was fix his gaze on this stretch of ancient Sword Lake. The instant the sword intent began to stir, the demon sect's heretics would march straight into the snare. Duskbloom hadn't thrown a wide net. Kaelan understood that was a courtesy, a nod to the bond they shared. Gratitude sat heavy in his chest. But the heavier it grew, the hotter his worry for Xylia burned. Her first command, her subordinates could never imagine their opponent would be someone of that caliber. The Dipper's handle pointed southeast. The start of summer had come. The midday sun drove straight down into Ancient Sword Lake like a white, hot spike. The vast shore stretched empty and dead. No wandering sightseers, no treasure hunters jostling for position. The lake's murderous reputation, Sword Kai erupting at random to slaughter anything in reach, had turned this plaque into barren ground. A handful of bold stragglers lurked far off in the distance, making the water's surface feel even more like a colossal, slumbering mirror. Frost paced slowly along the rocky shore, pebbles grinding beneath his boots. Each snap echoed like a knuckle rapping against his own sword hilt. Then he saw them, the cluster of black, robed figures by the water. They stood openly on the shore, no effort to hide. There was nowhere to hide. A ring of black, robed men encircled a young woman with a slender, elegant frame. From a distance, it looked like some noble daughter out for a stroll with her attendants. But Frost recognized her in a glance. This girl was the little witch who'd sparred with Kaelan using nothing but her mouth that day. And one of the black-robed figures beside her was the same man who'd spoken to him back then. No wonder Kaelan was coming here. Frost stopped outside the invisible boundary and clasped his hands from a distance. Frost has arrived. How does one observe the sword? Xylia's gaze landed on his face. Even through the veil, her hesitation was plain. The first words out of her mouth went straight to Kaelan. What is your relationship with him? Friends. How good of a friend? He saved my life. Xylia planted her hands on her hips and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You saved his life too. If you hadn't stuck your nose in, I'd already have his head. The corner of Frost's mouth twitched. He stayed silent. Inwardly, he mused that if things had gone on, she might well have taken it. Though what she'd do with it after was another question. He crushed the thought and said, voice low, miss, are you settling scores with me because I ruined your plans that day? Xylia pinched her fingertips together. This was exactly what made her head pound. If this man were truly Kaelan's enemy, cheating him wouldn't matter at all. But these past days, watching from a distance, the bond between these two was clearly not shallow. If she trapped him, Kaelan would likely fall out with her. Taking Kaelan's life is easy enough. That tiny bit of meddling from you counts for nothing. Xylia lifted her chin, her tone still thick with the full swagger of a demoness. Hold to our agreement, and that trifling matter is wiped clean. As the words faded, a thread of sound, so thin and light, drilled straight into Frost's ear, as if someone pressed their lips against his eardrum and breathed. Soon, when we start the ritual, the sword will certainly emerge, but don't let your sword obsession flare. No matter how much you admire it, say it rejects you, don't take it, don't touch it, remember this. Frost's heart slammed. Whispered transmission. This girl had likely reached the 6th stage of the mysterious gate, yet with so many experts hemming her in, transmitting her voice like this took staggering risk. One slip and she'd be exposed. She was taking this chance only because he was Kaelan's friend. His expression held steady. He clasped his hands once more. Frost said before, once I see the sword and deem it suitable, the agreement becomes binding. Xylia let out a peal of laughter, crisp and bright, as if that whispered warning had been nothing but a passing breeze. Young Master Han is a man of his word, we trust that. All right, noon is nearly here, the ritual begins. Far off, deep in the bamboo grove, Kaelan crouched in the shadow of an aged stalk, his eyes straining until the vessels nearly split red. With his enhanced farce sight, he could see it clearly, the black, robed figures scattering, their feet tracing a formation shaped like the Southern Dipper, their lips moving in muffled unison. But the open shore, the tight wall of bodies boxing Xylia in it, was an absolute barricade, not a single gap to slide through. How could he reach her? How could he pass her a secret signal? He couldn't even stretch a single finger in. Kaelan's jaw clamped tight, his hand pressed unconsciously against the grip of his bow. Out on the lake, the sun clawed its way to the zenith. From the lakebed, a deep, grinding tremor rolled upward. This was no earthquake. It felt like something in the black, unfathomable depths had simply shifted in its sleep, and the whole lake floor groaned in answer. Dense, fine ripples spread across the water's surface, as if invisible fingers were shoving outward from the center. Then a chill poured down from the crown of his head, bone, deep. Not wind, sword Kai, the sword intent, fine as ox hair, radiated from the heart of the lake. It pierced skin, wormed into the crevices of bone, like countless icy needles striking all at once. The longsword strapped to Frost's back shuddered on its own. The iron inside the scabbard seemed to come alive, trembling with a mad, fevered fervor. Frost gripped his sword hilt, veins bulged in ridges across the back of his hand, his stare locked onto the lake, a web of bloodlines rising in his eyes. This sword intent. It wasn't something born of the mortal world. Deep in the bamboo grove, a bowstring cracked. The bowstring bit into the grooves of his fingers, parting skin in a clean, bloodless split that welled crimson a heartbeat later. Kaelan didn't flinch. He drew the bow full, a perfect moon, and the arrowhead caught the noon sun, burning with a single point of frigid light. The arrow screamed. Its passage tore a savage gale through the bamboo, ripping leaves from their stalks by the thousands. Green shreds churned in the shaft's wake, pulverized to emerald dust, swirling into a ragged comet, tail of shattered foliage chasing the arrow's flight. It streaked straight for the elder leading the formation. Who dares interfere? The elder's hand snapped up. He swatted the arrow aside like a nuisance fly, but the formation beneath his feet stuttered half a beat of chaos, a single frozen instant where the ritual ceased. From the bamboo grove, Kaelan's laughter erupted, wild and unbridled. The saintess wants my life, so I'll repay her by spoiling her plans. An eye for an eye. Catch me if you dare. The laugh still echoed when robes sliced the air from every corner of the grove. 4 symbols sect's elite killers surged from ambush, 7th tier, 8th tier, profound pass cultivators, every one of them a ferocious predator. They closed in from all sides like a colossal net, and the shockwaves of their charge snapped bamboo stalks apart with deafening cracks. Tattered leaves whirled in chaotic fury. Kaelan's gaunt silhouette darted through the grove at breakneck speed. Each stride found a bamboo node, springing off for rebound force, a wisp of black smoke hugging the ground. But the auras pursuing him pressed closer and closer, each one drilled into his spine until the skin tingled numb. By the lakeshore, Frost stood petrified, his knuckles blanched white around his sword hilt. Kaelan had never mentioned this. This was plunging straight into a death trap. Righteousness to the heavens still requires a care for your own damn life. Beneath her veil, Xylia's brows wrenched tight. She knew Kaelan better than anyone. He was no brainless fool. He would never deliberately sabotage her business unless he believed what she was doing would harm her. And with no way to get word through, he could only scream his warning in this most foolish and desperate way. Something was wrong. Xylia whipped her head around, ceased the offering ceremony at once. The several elders stared. Saintess, a mere rat stirring up trouble doesn't warrant.
I said stop now, her voice squeezed between clenched teeth, jaw trembling under the veil. Who is the saintess, you or me? No reasons. Cease immediately.
The elders exchanged bewildered glances, but the saintess had spoken to this degree. Even unwilling, they dared not openly defy her over a treasure hunt. Swallowing fury, they retracted their spiritual energy. The ceremony halted. Xylia released half a breath of relief. She was about to concoct an excuse to slip away and help Kaelan escape. Her foot froze mid-step.
No.
She had ordered the ritual stopped, but the quaking deep beneath the lake had not subsided. It grew more pronounced, more violent. The sword intent shifted from faint whispers to a tide of bone-chilling cold that surged forth like a flood, forcing the ordinary bystanders at the lake to stumble back in shrieking alarm. Something's wrong, someone else is sustaining the spirit link. Protector Elder Yu of the Azure Dragon spun around, his gaze piercing like lightning toward the opposite shore. There stood a group of seemingly ordinary sword seekers. Not a single one retreated. In unison, their hands rose to form seals, and the scripture chanting from their mouths wove seamlessly into the broken ceremony. The staccato tremors from the lakebed grew more violent under their intonations. May try a sect. Elder Yu's beard and hair stood on end. Killing intent erupted. The lakeshore beneath his feet shattered into a web of cracks from the sheer force of his Kai. By instinct, he would have already bounded across the water to slaughter them. But his earlier pause in the ceremony had been reluctant and resentful, and that moment's hesitation allowed the opposite shore to seize the initiative. He could hold back no longer. His figure burst into motion, flashing across the water's surface. 4 symbols sect carries out its own business. Outsiders dare interfere. Stay, then. Elder Yu, rein in your temper. A splash of spray exploded on the lake surface. A bald, oily, faced fatty came slogging across the waves from the opposite shore, his bloated monk robes ballooned with true Kai, puffing like a swollen sail. Each step he struck against the water detonated a towering column of spray, the droplets shattering under the midday sun into millions of ghastly white beads. With a greasy grin, he planted himself squarely in Elder Yu's charge path. We merely wanted a glimpse of the legendary ancient sword's true appearance. Turns out it demands midday on the first day of summer. Our thanks to 4 symbols sect for clearing that up. The fat monk pressed his palms together, thick lips stretching into a unctuous smirk.
Since your esteemed saintess declared it abandoned, how can our continuance be counted as interference?
The words hadn't faded before two torrents of true Kai collided with a thunderous boom.
The mirror-smooth lake was ripped to shreds, reflected blue sky and white clouds shattered like brittle glass. Spray and Kai churned into expanding rings of white foam. Deep beneath the lakebed, the sword's hum rose ever louder, something tearing through the last layers of its seal with feral impatience. The spray under the fat monk's feet hadn't yet settled. His obese frame had already planted itself like a wall of meat, dead, blocking Elder Yu's path. Elder Yu didn't bother acknowledging the blather. His palm blasted out. Lean silhouette and bloated silhouette clashed in a flash. The air itself seemed to detonate. The lake's heart was smashed as if by an invisible, titanic hammer. Countless water pearls shot upward like arrows, and a vast mist of white spray billowed skyward. True Kai ripples swept across in every direction. Reeds along the shore sheared off at the roots, shredded leaves dancing madcap in the air. All eyes of four symbols sect turned to Xylia. Her expression stayed ice. Mate, Ryasect cannot possibly meet the divine sword's conditions for a master. We retreat the further, the better. Let them summon the sword and kill themselves. The sword will return on its own. Elder Yu, indignant but obeying, forced the fat monk back with a palm strike and shot backward in retreat. The very moment four symbols sect pulled back. From the depths of the lake, a peerlessly lethal intent pierced the heavens. The sword had not yet appeared. Its will arrived first. The lake surface split with a hiss, a snow-white scar opening as water cascaded aside to reveal the abyssal lakebed. Invisible sword, Kai tore through the void with a piercing shriek. Some fiend from the Nine Nethers had opened its eyes. A chill shot through the fat monk's nether region. He whipped his head down in horror. Sword intent already at his rear. His obese body erupted with shocking agility. Twisting his waist, lurching sideways, the sword Kai grazed his buttock as it sliced past. Blood blossomed. A slab of rump flesh spun away, blood mist exploding into a flower midair. He clutched his bleeding bottom and roared, "Are you all idiots? This patriarch is still on the lake, and you summon the sword." The Maitria sect disciples were ashen. We never finished. At most, we connected with the dimensional layer. The divine sword might not even have woken. The fat monk's pupils constricted. Not a summoning? The divine sword had sensed some presence it loathed to the extreme, and was breaking out on its own. The sword's energy tore through the heavens, streaking past the blood mist, past Elder Yu who had spun around in sharp vigilance, past all the sword light that the four symbols CT experts frantically hacked out. As if they were nothing. Elder Yvain's blade cleaved empty air. The sword intent had already brushed past his temple, severing a few strands of white hair. None could block it. Xylia clenched her jaw and crossed her short sword to parry. Metal shrieked against metal, a brittle, piercing scream. The short sword broke on impact, the severed blade spinning away to embed itself in a distant bamboo stalk. Titanic force flooded into Xylia's arm, the web of her thumb split open, blood trickling between her fingers. She choked back the blood rising in her throat and used the momentum to hurtle backward. Her figure shot into the bamboo grove. Broken bamboo crackled and splintered. Shredded debris flew skyward, grazing her pale cheeks. The divine sword showed no mercy. Blue light flowed along its blade like glacial spirit, and with a keening wail, it plunged into the grove. It's over. The members of Four Symbols sect, faces the color of death, dashed madly after it. Deep within the bamboo grove, Xylia came crashing down, slamming into a warm chest. She had no time to see who it was before that person spun with her in his arms, shielding her fiercely behind him. Kaelan! Sweat slid from his temple and dropped onto her upturned face. He gripped the sheath of the dragon's barrow blade, knuckles bleached white, the scabbard trembling faintly. Before him, the divine sword hung suspended in midair. The blue light along its blade pulsed a slow, patient heartbeat. It did not strike. It simply hovered there, the tip leveled at Kaelan's chest, as if studying him. Kaelan's breath came ragged. Blood from his cut fingers dripped onto the bamboo litter at his feet, but he did not move. His body remained planted between that sword and Xylia. A long, brittle silence stretched through the shattered grove. The divine sword tilted. A minute adjustment of angle, the barest fraction of a degree, the blue light rippled. And then it began to laugh. Not a sound, a vibration, a frequency that resonated in the bones and teeth, a silent, predatory amusement that pressed against the skull from the inside. Kaelan's grip on the dragon's barrow blade tightened until the tendons stood out like cables. His lips peeled back from his teeth. "Go ahead," he rasped. "Try it." The divine sword's laughter stopped.
The grove held its breath.
The tip of the blade stopped 3 inches from his throat. Ice blue light rippled along the edge, painting shifting shadows across Kaelan's face. He held his stare on that sword tip.
His feet stayed planted.
His body made tiny adjustments with every sway of the blade, each shift keeping Xylia squarely behind the shield of his own frame. The divine sword paused, just for a breath, then it tilted, angling to slip past him.
Kaelan spun with it.
The sword darted again. He turned again. One advancing, one retreating, they carved a silent standoff through the narrow bamboo grove. Fallen leaves spiraled wild in the churning sword currents, grazing their sleeves as they moved. Behind him, Xylia stared at his back. His torn robe was soaked through with sweat, plastered tight against his shoulder blades. She wrenched herself forward and reversed their positions, dragging Kaelan behind her. The divine sword thrummed like thunder, and stopped hesitating. It plunged down. "Shit, are you brain? Dead?" Kaelan's snarl barely left his mouth before the tip reached Xylia's forehead. And stopped. A hand had closed around the hilt. Lean, knuckled, absolutely steady, faint sweat from hard travel still seeped between those fingers. Frost stood there. When he'd arrived, no one could say. His breathing still came uneven, but his expression had gone profoundly strange. The divine sword shuddered violently in his grip, its razor, sharp aura receded layer by layer, like a tide pulling back from shore. A low murmur rose from the blade, casting 3 interwoven silhouettes in its sheen. "The divine sword has a message," Frost said. His voice carried an odd, dry inflection. "You too, get lost." "It came to kill someone treacherous and faithless, not to watch a pair of idiot lovers make moon eyes while ready to die for each other."
"If it has to witness this a moment longer, it's afraid it'll cut you both down out of sheer irritation."
Xylia sprang up. "Treacherous? Who's treacherous? You'd better explain yourself." A hand tugged the hem of her robe from behind. Kaelan's voice, low and urgent. "Azure Dragon's seal."
Xylia's hand shot inside her robes.
The seal emerged. Its archaic surface glowed faint beneath the sword light. The divine sword convulsed. Frost barely held on, and the flat of the blade brushed against the seal. Heaven and earth spun. 3 silhouettes twisted, thinned, and bled out like ink dropped into water. By the time the fighters of the 4 symbols sect burst into the grove, only the last dissolving wisp of an afterimage remained.
A deep, subsonic hum filled the air.
Water, the scent of ancient stone, a pocket dimension sustained by the divine sword, nothing more than a splintered plane. When the epoch collapsed, this place had torn free and clung to existence like a parasite, its passage hidden beyond mortal sight. Kaelan's gaze dropped to the Azure Dragon seal in Xylia's arms. Only one bond could have stirred the divine sword into that killing rage. It had to stem from this seal, a relic born of the same fallen epoch. His voice came out hard. "Try using the Azure Dragon seal to commune with the sword." Xylia brought out the seal. The blade convulsed again, nearly ripping free of Frost's hand, the moment its tip touched the seal. An ancient force wrenched all 3 of their consciousness straight into a rift in time. The Dragon Lord stood immovable as a mountain, the phantom of an azure dragon coiling soundless around him. His deep voice boomed like the toll of a bronze bell. "When heaven stirs the killing intent, the very stars shift their dwellings. I fear the celestial order bends toward cataclysm. 10,000 tribulations shall descend. I must return to make my preparations. If I can break free of this doom, I will seek you out again." The forlorn lady's robes trembled in the draught. Her eyes held a dead stillness like a fallen star. "Why did you lie to me?" Her voice scraped thin. "The Night Emperor has already fallen. What you want is his position command of that page of the heavenly script. You're afraid I still hold ties to them. So you leave me here deliberately, so no one can interfere while you work." The Dragon Lord fell silent for a long moment. "You may think of it that way." "No matter what you intend to do, I can wait for you." The ghost of a smile forced itself onto her lips. "I can wait no matter how long, even until the epoch is renewed. What I fear is that you will not come." "Rest your heart, I will certainly come." She looked at him. Slowly she nodded. "Good. I believe you if you truly can come. I still have something to give you." Soundless ripples spread across the sword wall. The man's robe, hem vanished as he turned. Nothing remained but a chamber filled with bone, deep cold. The forlorn lady waited in vain. When the epoch crumbled, her heart died to ash. She took her own life within the sword chamber. Her final gaze hung frozen upon the empty void, still waiting for a promise that would never sound again. The vision shattered like foam on water. 3 pairs of eyes opened. The true sword chamber, swords hung on every wall, their chill breath piercing, a skeleton sat cross-legged at the center, its robes rotted to dust long ago. All life force had been severed for 10,000 ages. The divine sword broke free of Frost's grip. It circled the skeleton, keening, a choked, sobbing note that would not end. Xylia's nose stung. She unfastened the azure dragon seal and lowered herself to her knees before the bones.
Senior.
This junior received the baptism of this seal and inherited its cultivation arts, but I am no longer its original master. Her voice scraped raw. I am a woman, senior. The divine sword's wail stopped cold. It despised the faithless. It cherished the loyal by nature. Yet this person was drenched in the azure dragon seal's aura, and had pledged her heart to another. Was that not a deeper betrayal of the original master? Sword intent surged chaotic, killing edge rising and receding in violent waves, until Kaelan's hand wrapped around the hilt. Layer upon layer of profound loyalty enveloped it, the divine sword stilled completely. Xylia looked down at the azure dragon seal. Slow tearlight gathered in her eyes. She thought of her mother. Senior, the inheritance inside the azure dragon seal has already been absorbed by me. What remains is only a symbol. Her voice dropped, quiet and lost. If Senior loathes this thing, this junior is willing to smash it. Perhaps the gesture is too slight, too meaningless. She clenched her teeth and rammed the azure dragon seal into the stone floor. The muffled boom rang out, chips bursting from bluestone, but not a single scratch marked the seal's surface. Xylia tore the divine sword from the air, gripped its hilt with both hands, and swung down with every shred of her strength. The azure dragon seal exploded with a radiance that seared the eyes. The blade crashed home, metal shrieked on metal, a grieving phoenix weeping the entire space convulsed. Splinters sprayed outward like wildfire, setting the whole chamber ablaze with light. A treasure that had spanned epochs lay hacked cleanly in two. The divine sword loosed a chime of crystalline, transcendent joy. Through every shudder of the space spread a sword sense of pure, unburdened release, like a single long, drawn-out exhalation. Frost stared at Xylia's back. His expression shifted hard. This woman was ruthless. Kaelan stepped forward without a word. He gathered her trembling shoulders into a gentle hold. It's over. The senior will let go of his anger too. As if to answer him, the skeleton that had sat cross-legged for eons seemed to conjure the ghost of a smile on its fleshless face. In the next breath, the bones crumbled inch by inch into dust, drifting upward like phosphorescent blue wisps toward the stone ceiling. The lingering sword intent gave one final, mournful hum, then faded into stillness. Once the obsession was spent, it simply dissolved. I once heard elders of the Sword Hermitage speak of such tales, Frost said. His voice had gone uncharacteristically distant. Never thought I'd see myth and legend come alive before my eyes. The previous epoch. Kaelan shot him a sidelong glance, arms still wrapped around Xylia. Her breathing had steadied. Kaelan asked low, the azure dragon seal is smashed. Can you still answer for this? No one's going to inspect my seal anyway. Worst case, I'll report that the Maitreya sect stole it, and go beat them up. You really are something? Xylia let out a soft sigh. The seal was already useless, just a symbol. Whether I keep my position as Holy Maiden doesn't hinge on a dead object. The problem is, the first important mission they gave me has turned into a complete mess. Your mission was to retrieve the sword, Frost interjected. Yes, it'll be... Then the mission is accomplished, isn't it? Both of them turned to stare at him. In unison, we thought that sword belongs to you. Frost had no words. He pointed beside Xylia's hand. Look at it. That sword is practically glued to your palm. From what angle does that make it mine? The divine sword nestled against Xylia's hand, its tassel swaying gently, like a cat that had chosen its owner. Xylia's gaze dropped to the sword in her hand, and something clicked clean and quiet inside her. The old master's obsession had burned itself out. This blade was ready for a new life, and if it meant to choose, it would only choose the one who shattered the azure dragon seal. No one else, no matter how sincere, how righteous, could ever be more than a temporary companion. Just look at Dragonsparrow now, still prickly and half-hearted with Kaelan. She tightened her grip on the hilt, her voice low. This sword knows. Done and dusted, I guess. Kaelan looked at Frost, wincing a little. Brother Han, it's not what I get it. Frost didn't let him finish. You're loyal to the bone, and you thought the blade was made for me, so you wanted to hand it over, but I don't want it. I've never met a sword so wrapped up in love and heartbreak. What kind of swordsman needs that baggage? And it's too damn pretty. I track bounties for a living. My weapon should be plain, forgettable. Kaelan opened his mouth, then shut it. Can't argue with that, so, your sword then. Frost lifted a hand and swept it toward the four walls. These are all ancient blades, top-tier steel, that old master had tasted, Any one of them is extraordinary. I don't lust after divine weapons. Good enough is good. Lean too hard on an external crutch, and you'll rot out the core of your swordcraft. He paused, eyes cutting between them. Same goes for you too. Stop leaning on the god. Tier weapons in your palms. Sure, you can punch above your weight for a while, but play that game long enough and it hollows you out. Kaelan took a full step back, pressed his fists together, and bowed low. Thank you for the teaching, Brother Han. His heels snagged. He glanced down. The prayer mat the skeleton had sat on for centuries lay there, its golden threads untouched by rot. The moment his fingertips brushed the mat, the icy fibers shivered with a weird, stubborn spring. They'd held, perfectly preserved through eons of silence. His pupils shrank. He dug into the crack in the weave. A sliver of golden light bled through, deep inside the threading, softer than silk, a single eye yawning open after 1,000-year sleep. Not the gloss of metal, colder, heavier, like old moonlight sealed tight in amber. The gold leaf lay still in the mat's hidden pocket, weighing nothing at all. Faint traceries coiled across its surface, serpents, dragons maybe, and the patterns slipped away the instant his eyes focused on them. Kaelan stopped breathing. Deep in the back of his skull, the forlorn lady's voice crashed through. The Night Emperor has fallen. What you're after? That's just his throne, a way to command a page of the heavenly script. The heavenly script. He pinched the edge of the gold leaf. Not a whisper of spiritual energy. It felt flatter than junk paper. He flipped it over, both sides, ran his thumb across its grain. No words. No resonance, a material his senses couldn't name. If you can't read a thing, it's either a divine artifact hiding itself, or it's gone all the way back to raw simplicity. Either way, it's kind of pathetic. Xylia leaned in for a quick look, probably just for chanting sutras. Kaelan blinked. She had a point. The Chronicle of Chaos was a heavenly script artifact too, and it practically screamed its presence. This thing, dead quiet. He stuffed the gold leaf into his robes without ceremony. Xylia bit her lip. Her gaze flicked toward the sword wall. Frost stood frozen, an ancient blade naked in his grip. His whole body locked like carved stone. Sword intent churned around him, slow and cold as autumn water turning to ice, deep in the trance already. Xylia pulled her eyes away. She rose on her toes, fabric whispering, until her lips brushed Kaelan's ear. Her voice came out honey, thick, almost dripping so. You really didn't get anything else out of this? Huh, Kaelan jolted. Were you scared I'd been holy maiden so long I'd forget you? That why you threw your life away to protect me back there? Look, there wasn't exactly time to think about. You were worried something would happen to me. You knew the 4 symbols sex heavy hitters were everywhere, and you still broke the ritual, knew you could die. And you didn't stop to think about that either. You're my senior sister. If I don't trust you, who's left? Xylia shot him a glare, equal parts fury and adoration fogging her eyes. The whole mood's set, and you give me that. Wait, there's literally someone here. Before the words finished, she hooked her arms around his neck. Her mouth met his with a shock of cool, like lake water, then turned molten. Kaelan's thoughts dissolved into a roar. His arms locked around her waist on pure reflex, and that waist, God's, beneath the soaked robes, it was so impossibly soft. The curve of her pressed flush against his chest and their heartbeats hammered straight through 2 layers of wet cloth. Her breath went ragged. Tiny, helpless sounds broke between her teeth, and she pulled him tighter. Senior brother's chest. Xylia caught his hand and pressed it flat over her heart. Her voice dipped into something low and rough. Touch it, it's really gotten bigger. The softness under his palm was scalding. Her heart slammed against his hand again and again and again. The sword chamber hung thick with rust and ancient timber, sword intent coiling through the air like silk strands. Frost kept his back to them, his face entirely blank as he examined the blade in his hands, but the tips of his ears flared a deep, treacherous red. He pulled the sword, slow. 3 inches of steel rasped against the sheath's throat, and the sound was clean as a dragon moaning through a hidden valley. The old sword, intent in the chamber, stirred itself awake, spiraling around him in invisible funnels. Decent edge. He slammed it home, hard, deliberate. Clang, the report cracked through the stone chamber like ice water hitting hot oil. Xylia and Kaelan snapped apart like they'd been electrocuted. Her lips still gleamed, her chest heaved. Frost turned around, face flat. Got a sword. If you two don't move now, the 4 symbols sect will have this whole lake flipped by sundown. They didn't waste another breath. The divine sword lit softly around them, lifting the 3 through the water toward the surface. Above the lake, the slaughter was peaking. The last of the Maitreya sect's disciples dropped under Elder Yvain's blade. Blood slicked the fuller as it fell away. Yvain dragged in a raw breath and looked up just as a plume of lake water exploded skyward at the center.
Xylia broke the surface. Water streamed from her hair, her drenched robes molding to her frame. In her hand, point, down, the deep azure longsword bled a cold, pulsing breath of dragon.
Yvain's eyes ignited, the words ripped out of him, the saintess of heavenly mandate.
The remaining 4 symbols sect fighters roared. Their cheering shook the reeds around the shore, water droplets scattering like rain.
Xylia's toes touched the lake surface, ripples spread, she stepped onto the bank, her gaze swept the bodies strewn across the mud, then sliced toward the distant hill. Black armored ranks of the Demon Suppression Bureau stood in formation. At their head, Duskbloom stood high on the rise, robes snapping hard in the wind, the Springwater sword still naked in her fist. One look and alarm shrieked through Xylia's skull. That woman is too beautiful. She's Kaelan's subordinate.
Can you really keep your head straight around her, Kaelan? Her hand locked tighter around the sword hilt.
Duskbloom's eyes met hers across the distance, then slid off. Her voice cut across the field, cold and clear as crystal.
All units on my word, seize the 4 symbols sect demons.
The 4 symbols sect fighters shouted as one. Their shapes blurred. In the space of a breath, they'd melted deep into the reeds. Xylia threw one final look at Duskbloom, then she vanished with them.
Duskbloom didn't follow. Her gaze settled on the far hill, where Kaelan and Frost now stood.
Amid the chaos, those 2 had already slipped ashore on the lake's opposite edge and climbed this nameless rise.
Dead grass lay flattened.
The sinking sun hauled their 2 shadows out long and thin across the earth.
Kaelan watched the 4 symbols sects retreat until his heart finally settled back into his chest. He turned his head.
Caught Frost's gaze pulling away. The silence hit them both at once. Wind tore through the gap in the hill, whipping dried grass into their faces. Kaelan spoke first, still want the fight.
Frost's hand found the hilt. You've been dying to beat me down for ages. Perfect timing. I've got a gut full of fire needs burning off.
Kaelan bared his teeth. His hand was already pressing down on Dragonsparrow's grip. Hell yes, twice now, you and me. Once when you almost carved me up at the inn. Once when you tanked things on purpose in the sword chamber. Old debts and fresh ones. Let's settle them clean. Dragonsparrow shrieked free. The blade thrummed, Saber Kai snarling at the edge into the phantom of a black tiger. The air split open with a guttural snarl.
Frost drew, steel bit against the scabbard in a long metallic shriek. Then fight. Ching!
Kaelan lunged, stone fractured beneath his foot in a web of fine cracks. He hacked out with full force, Saber Kai ripping through the air, the black tiger roaring. Frost's longsword angled upward in a slanting parry, the tip catching the blade's weakest point with perfect precision.
A deafening clang of colliding metal exploded.
The rock crazed, fissures spider-webbing outward, the surrounding dead grass flattened, and never rose again.
Duskbloom shook her head, light and slow, on the distant hill. Her handmaiden's voice dropped to a whisper. My lady, will you not watch the outcome?
Frost's cultivation surpasses Kaelan's. What if there's an accidental injury? He won't be injured. Duskbloom turned away, the Springwater sword sliding home with a final hiss. Surface wounds at most. He deserves every one of them.
Dozens of strikes, blade on blade, a furious rhythm like driving rain hammering broad leaves. Their strength gave out in tandem.
They collapsed onto their backs in the withered grass, chests heaving, weapons scattered, edges rolled and blunted. Kaelan stared up at the sea of sunset washing the sky. A laugh broke from his lips. You held back a killing move just now, didn't you? For a split second, my scalp went numb. Correct. Frost gazed skyward, voice raw. I yielded it. The outcome was already decided.
Bullshit. Kaelan fumbled for the wine gourd at his waist, yanked the stopper free, and poured a long gulp down his throat.
Liquor spilled over his jaw and into his collar. I was suppressing Dragonsparrow's full power. Without relying on a divine weapon's might, I might actually have lost. I'll admit that.
But that killing move of yours, why didn't you use it earlier, when you were trapped in mortal danger?
Silence. Frost's voice came only after a long pause. I comprehended that move in the sword chamber, while you were off kissing a woman.
Kaelan choked on his wine. Women truly do cripple cultivation's speed.
Just resolve it at a brothel and be done with it. A martial artist's heart shouldn't get dragged down in such places. And if someone falls for you.
If I have clearly refused, there will naturally be no faithless entanglements. I had no interest to begin with. Why ruin someone's life? Frost turned his head, his gaze earnest.
A hero of your caliber should not get tangled up in matters of men and women either. It always feels off.
The martial world in your mind and mine are still different.
Oh.
Kaelan took another swig of wine, watching the last smear of sunset glow at the horizon. What I dream of is roaming the rivers and lakes with a blade, a cup of wine in hand, a slender waist resting light in my palm.
Well, I've achieved the first half even if I'm using a saber instead of a sword. The second half, I can't seem to pull off with any grace.
It always feels awkward.
Frost was silent for a moment, then let out a dry laugh. It may not entirely suit your temperament, but it feels like you're already on that path. Though I'd caution you, those words reek of a faithless heart. If you truly walk this road, Xylia's blade at her waist will claim your head sooner or later. A fragment of the poem's second couplet flashed through Kaelan's mind. 10 years, a Yongju dream. I wake to a faithless name in the pleasure quarters. Young brother Han is sharp. But then again, the faithless one haunting the pleasure quarters is Frost himself. That was never a role Kael and had any taste for.
Frost pushed himself upright. The pleasure fades. The time for parting has come. From now on, no one at your side to disturb you while you feast on women.
Kaelan tilted his head. Where are you going?
Back to the bottom of the lake.
That is a swordsman's domain. Frost gazed toward ancient Sword Lake, the last dying light reflected in his eyes. I intend to meditate on the sword there.
For how long?
The days are unknowable. I can slip back into the city for daily supplies. Sustenance won't be an issue. Kaelan clicked his tongue. A single day of that life, and he'd lose his mind. But the tranquility in Frost's eyes when he spoke. Kaelan understood it, swordsman. Kaelan rose to his feet, clenched his fist, and thumped Frost on the shoulder. Until we meet again then, you might be the first true friend I've made in this martial world. Frost did not answer. If dead friends did not count, then Kaelan was, in truth, his only friend in this vast realm of blades. He did not speak the words aloud. He merely tightened his grip on his sword, turned, and strode toward the lakeshore. Kaelan rolled to his feet. He slung Dragonsparrow across his back and descended the mountain in long, sweeping strides. In the deepening dusk, Sword Lake City's streets teemed with noise. He'd barely set foot in an alley when the brothel madame caught his sleeve. "Hey, young master," she simpered, her face a web of wrinkles. "Haven't you forgotten someone?" Kaelan pinched the bridge of his nose, then circled around to the back entrance. The bamboo grove lay serene. No sound of the zither stirred. He ascended the bamboo tower. Wooden steps groaned beneath his weight. Duskbloom sat draped in a robe, bent over her desk, writing. Candle Flame guttered, casting her shadow against the bamboo wall in a faint, swaying dance. As she lifted the brush, her sleeve slid back, exposing a sliver of slender wrist bone. Brush tip scraped paper, a soft rustling. Within it, a suppressed, ragged cough stirred. Scent of ink mingled with herbs, permeating the bamboo pavilion. Kaelan stood at the doorway. Duskbloom did not raise her head. "What are you standing there for? Come in and speak." "I came to report, then I'll leave," Kaelan said. "The divine sword did not rampage and injure anyone. Does that count as completing the mission?" "Do you think this mission can offset the cultivation technique and Dragonsparrow?" "I know it cannot." Kaelan's voice was cold. "But I do not want anyone meddling in my personal affairs, not even my own father." Duskbloom set down her brush. She raised her head and fixed her gaze on him. "Wait," she sighed and stood up. "It was presumptuous of me." "Young Master Zhao is no heartless man, which is a good thing. If you are not in a hurry to return, come and have a cup of tea." "I now suspect you are monitoring my inn," Kaelan said icily. "Remove it." "I am not monitoring it." Duskbloom shook her head. "On the contrary, there are people guarding the roads outside. Young Master Zhao's horse is too precious, and Sword Lake City is a chaotic place. Without the Demon Suppression Bureau, it would have been stolen long ago." Kaelan was taken aback. "Fine," he sighed and stepped inside, sitting across from her. Duskbloom silently prepared the tea. Boiling water poured into the cup, the tea leaves churning. "Seat Leader Duskbloom," Kaelan said, "to be honest, it's rather a pity for me not having experienced the chaos of Sword Lake City. What you need is not protection?" "No," Kaelan stared at her. "A protected Kaelan may never grow again. But letting you roam the martial world unchecked is too dangerous." "Then if you truly see me as a prince, you should help me conceal my identity. The wanted notice back then was perfect. If vermilion birds mate, I believes Prince Valen is dead. I won't face the dangers you worry about." Duskbloom's eyes held undisguised admiration. "And if you die?" Kaelan said calmly, "Then I might as well be dead." Silence fell over the bamboo pavilion. Duskbloom slowly raised her teacup. "Wanzhuang understands," she said softly. "A toast to your highness." Kaelan pinched the teacup, paused, then said, "Have you ever considered? What a prince wants may not be to inherit the throne, but to defy the heavens themselves." He raised his cup and clinked it against hers. Porcelain met with a crisp, clear sound. The scalding tea, he tilted his head and drained it in one gulp. His throat bobbed. When he set the cup down, Porcelain tapped the table with a faint sound. He turned and left the room.
The candlelight stretched his shadow long against the bamboo wall, like a blade cleaving light from darkness.
Duskbloom watched his silhouette vanish at the stairway entrance, then let out a helpless chuckle. The maid said indignantly, "That Kaelan dares to say anything.
He's got a rebellious bone in his head."
Duskbloom did not reply. She stretched lazily and returned to her desk. Candle flame flickered. She picked up her brush, dipped it in ink, and after a moment's contemplation, wrote a comment. Ambition like the Kunpeng, yet to leave the northern deep. Prowess like dragon and tiger, claws and fangs still young. The ink on the rice paper was still wet. Outside the window, the bamboo grove rustled.